Alrighty. Hi, I'm Angela Poole, and this is my audience, Mariana. She's all the way from Brazil, so you should appreciate her time here with us today. We're talking about my heritage, which is not necessarily something I like to talk about a lot, but it was my assignment, so I'm going to do it enthusiastically, or as enthusiastically as possible. So I was born in '99. My father was on his third marriage, my mother was on her second marriage, and I had two much older brothers. I was born in southern Georgia, and there was a pretty significant difference in culture moving from the deep south to the Midwest, as you can imagine. A bunch of Baptists, corn, lots of corn in the south. Moving up north, there's more soybeans, more Catholics, better education system. People are people are friendlier down south. In the north, they're not as friendly and they're not as kind, but you can expect that. Especially where I grew up in the South, we were in the middle of rural everything, smack dab in the middle of what used to be a tobacco plantation that now grows just about everything. My grandmother still owns the land, but she rents it out to different plantation owners, so they plant whatever they like to plant. Lots of forests, lots of horses down there. Up here, we live in a suburb, so much smaller area. It's a significant difference in from there to here. Southern roots. My father is from southern Georgia. His family grew a tobacco plantation that fell into ruin in the 50s and 60s. Almost every man in my family ended up succumbing to addiction based on lacking resources. He used to describe where he grew up. You either joined the military, you got into drugs, or you went to work at the t-shirt factory. And when he graduated high school, he was declined from joining the military because of his asthma, and the t-shirt factory was no longer hiring because they had a recession. So he didn't really have a choice of what he was going to do. He didn't have the money to move on with his life. He was stuck. So he got roped into what his father was doing at the time, which was carting Oxycontin over the Florida Georgia line. My grandfather is in his 80s and he still does that for a living. Female family members worked to support the family at home, and most of my male family members spent significant amounts of time in prison, or they were actively committing drug crime for money. And down there, the poverty constricts opportunities available to young people. Here's an example of a tobacco plantation, what it looks like. My father grew up working the tobacco plantation before it was completely defunct, and he had to miss a lot of school at that time in his life. He used to describe how it would pour down rain and the tobacco plants would slap him in the face and burn his eyes, but he wasn't allowed to leave the tobacco field until he was done. Midwestern life was where my mother grew up just a few miles of here in Martin County. My grandpa grew up on a turkey farm. He was the valedictorian of his 8th grade class, but he never went any further. He met my grandmother. They got pregnant at 15, married at 16. Their first baby died to chromosomal abnormalities, and they have 5 living children. For most of their childhood, my grandfather worked at a factory, factories that we have around here in Jasper, limestone, that sort of thing. The kids went to school in one of the last one-room schoolhouses in the country. They lived in abject poverty. They walked to school every day barefoot. They didn't have running water in the house until my mother was 4 or 5 years old. They didn't have a flush toilet. They had an outhouse. And then they finally moved when she was a teenager, and moving from the one-room schoolhouse to a real high school in a small city was so terrifying that she dropped out. So, second generation legacy is my father spent his life in and out of prison on drug-related charges, and my mother dropped out of high school. She married at 18, and by 19 she had her oldest son and was working menial jobs to make ends meet with her first husband. My father abused just about every drug in the book. His final vice was fentanyl, which is the current pandemic we're experiencing in drug addiction. It followed him to his grave. He died of pancreatic cancer in 2018 at the age of 56, and my mother has not had any successful, happy relationships in her life with any men. She's an alcoholic. I have had to bail her out of jail twice since I turned 18. She's just not a very happy person. So, the implications for me, I'm a first generation college student. I've been studying nursing and I hope to become a psychiatric nurse because I wanted to advocate for people like my family who are poor and don't have access to education, because those people cannot advocate for themselves. They don't have access to the resources to know how to advocate for themselves, and they don't know where to start. Lots of them don't even have access to Wi-Fi or to internet, so how are they going to learn, especially in times like these where you need those things in order to access education? I want to battle classism both in healthcare and in the world at large, and in order to do that, you have to be able to climb the social ladder, which for many of my family was not an option. So, my final thought, classism. Classism is the destroyer of families. Socioeconomic disparities kill access to education and technology, which by extension kills access to upward mobility. White trash jokes and trailer trash jokes, they're just classism dressed up to sound funny. It wouldn't be funny if we were making fun of any other marginalized class of people. That's not funny. We mock people who act against their own best interests, and we don't consider why they do that. Politicians in those areas actively work to keep those people ignorant so they'll keep voting for them. The liberals that I know will just joke about, well, let's just cut off red states. We'll just hack Texas off or throw Mississippi off the map. We won't give them resources when they have hurricanes and earthquakes. We'll ignore them and pretend that they're not Americans until they decide to get on over to our side. And maybe that's why those states continue to vote red, because they can see how liberal people don't care for them and their interests, and they can see how liberal people don't understand the way that they lack access to many important things. If you want to end the cycle of poverty, like what my family experienced, they need help. They don't need mockery. Yeah, most of my family are conservative because they don't know anything else, and a lot of them didn't even graduate high school. If you believe in helping people, you need to believe in helping all people, not just the ones that agree with you. Let's kill them with kindness. Alrighty. Okay, I think that's it. Unless my thing didn't work. I need to figure out how do I